Hey again, everyone. Just your average Jen here. We're going to go back to Genesis, and I forget what I'm talking about, but let's find out together. All right. Da, 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 da. Oh, I did this wrong. Okay. Try to do it this way. I feel like I always screw something up. All right, we were just on podcast news, so here we go. Why don't I make this bigger? Maybe I shouldn't have made it bigger. Come on, computer. There we go. No intro music.
Welcome to the Weird Bible section of I'm Only Human, a podcast that is probably destined to become controversial if anyone actually listened to it. Inspired by people for people. I have different story arcs going on throughout my podcast, and this area focuses on the NIV Bible, copyright 2011. I'm taking things directly from the Bible and putting an average human perspective on history. According to the Bible, we were created in the image of this person named God. Well, there are plenty of other views on the topic too, but this one will remain focused on the Bible. I feel the repetition of human emotions and behaviors that preceded all the foolishness that has led to the culture of our modern world has been greatly overlooked. I will not be speaking in traditional religious terms, and I'm sure I'll be saying a bunch of stuff wrong too. My apologies in advance. I'm not trying to destroy religion. I believe we were all created equal. Somewhere along the line, we forgot about that. I believe there is more knowledge in the Bible than people realize. Join me on this exciting adventure. How does our modern world compare to the world in the Bible? Is God the biggest grifter of all time? I would like to state that I am not an expert. I get my knowledge by observation, evaluating, researching, and building on the things I learned from other people. I believe there is truth in science fiction, movies, and in children's stories. It's time to wake up. It's time to reprogram our thinking and change our world in a peaceful way. Welcome back. Last time I talked about Noah, the ark, and the flood. So now what? I just revamped the podcast, and I hope this will be a little easier to follow the Bible stories. My brain's a bit scattered, so it's going to be a mystery on how I relate these stories to modern times. But that's what makes it so interesting. How is this weird lady going to ruin the Bible for me today? Well, hang on and find out. History is so much easier to see when the whole picture is there. The problem is nobody seems to care, even in the midst of the same problems. Somehow, this time will be different than all the other hundreds of times the same things were tried and failed. According to the Bible, the people that came out of the ark were the only people in the entire world right now. So, we have Noah, Noah's wife, Noah's three sons, and the wives of Noah's three sons, plus all the animals in the world. Blah, blah, blah. The sons' names again were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I'm trying to follow the family line, but I think it gets a little complicated. I will do my best. I thought of something from last time, too. The earth was said to be flooded and everything died, including plants and such. How long does it take for an olive tree to grow? Like, how could that dove have brought back a freshly plucked olive leaf if all the vegetation had been killed? Wouldn't that take time to regrow everything? I know, and God, all things possible, yada, yada, yada. Also, Noah had taken some of the clean birds as soon as he was able to get out of that ark. He used them for burnt offerings. Well, did that cause the extinction of some animal species? I mean, everything in existence was in that ark with him, according to what the Bible story says. Anyhow, it's time to move along in the story. So, Genesis 10 talks about the table of nations. The table of nations came to be through Noah's family line, and that was the Japhethites, the Hamites, and the Semites. I'll let you look all that up on your own because there's a lot of names and stuff in there and family lineage. I didn't feel like following it. Anyway, by this time, the Earth was populated again by a great deal, it appears. But I didn't see any big news stories until Genesis 11. So here's what happened. Bleh. Genesis 11, verse 1 to 9. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar. They settled there. They said to each other, quote, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." End quote. They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, quote, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." End quote. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, quote, "As if one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other." End quote. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. End verse. I think anyone that has been following what I talk about is well aware that I have different views on the Bible and the Bible stories. It's time to expose more human behavior from the guy that created us. So the humans decided it would be a great idea to have everyone live together in a city rather than all spread out all over the place. Their intentions were to make a name for themselves and build a tower that reaches into the heavens. Sounds like most buildings and cities today. Each person trying to outdo the next to be known to make a name for themselves. Well, God didn't like that too much. Was he afraid we would learn the truth? Would his dominance end if humans were to able to figure out technology so soon? It sounded like fear to me. I can't say what he was afraid of, but he didn't like what was going on. Verse 6 says, "The Lord said, quote, as if one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them." End quote. Even our creator knew that communication is the key to anything. Our leaders today know the same thing. The way to stop communication is to divide people and keep that division in place. Why do you think the agenda keeps pushing race wars? I briefly mentioned a movie called A Bug's Life in another episode. I guess I get a lot of my thoughts from movies, music, other people, and books. I observe, absorb, reflect, and expand on things I see and hear. I think that is how real growth happens. Instead of rejecting something new and different, take time to think about what is really being relayed in the message. We were created and left to figure out life on our own. No wonder it's all messed up. These biblical humans had all the time in the world to figure out how to work together instead of trying to exploit others for personal gain, and they never figured it out either. Nor did they give us any reason to change our belief system. Anyone that thought outside the default programming was silenced, much like today, too. A Bug's Life is about an ant colony that has been forced to feed a gang of grasshoppers. The ants spend the beginning of the season harvesting food for this annual offering to the grasshoppers. The second part of the season is used for gathering food for themselves to get through the winter months. There's this one ant, his name's Flick, that is a creative thinker, and he liked to invent things, machines, to make life easier for everyone else. But everybody thought he was a quack. All the other ants thought he was a quack. But his grain harvesting invention worked, and it worked well, but it knocked a stone out of the way from the offering altar, and the whole food offering had fallen into the water. So when the grasshoppers arrived and landed, there was no food. And the ants were afraid of the grasshoppers, so they're hiding underground in their home at this point. because usually the grasshoppers, they come, they eat, they leave, and that's how it goes. But it was different this time. The food wasn't there. The grasshoppers decided to destroy part of the ant colony because they had to come down to the ants level to find out what was going on. The grasshoppers then pretended to be generous by letting the ants try to collect food again and just redo the offering. But the dilemma was that the ants would have no food for themselves to survive the winter because they had to feed the grasshoppers. Plus, the grasshoppers had just destroyed their home. So now time would have to be spent repairing the home while collecting food before the rains came. The island the ants lived on was big enough to support them, and there was enough for the grasshoppers, but there wasn't any more than that. The grasshoppers couldn't care less about the living conditions of the ants. They only wanted what they could extract from lower creatures. At one point, the ants were working so hard that they were falling over from exhaustion while bringing food to the offering leaf. As the princess, who was in training, and the old queen watched, they kept pushing the ants harder and harder, even though there was no more food to harvest. The workers did their best because they wanted to survive too. Nobody listened to Flick, so the harvesting took more time and more effort than it needed to. The whole reason the ants got roped into this in the first place was that the grasshoppers claimed to offer protection to the ant colony against other bugs. I don't even know how that conversation went, how it got started. It was all lies to begin with. So, getting back to this, right after the grasshoppers left to give the ants time to harvest again, Flick comes up with a plan to go to find bigger bugs to help his colony defeat the grasshoppers. Without the grasshoppers dominating the ants could live and work together the way they had been doing it for a long time. The Ant Council was scrambling to figure out how to deal with the food and the repair work dilemma at the same time. In the ant colony, they just wanted Flick out of the way so they could harvest for the grasshoppers without more things getting destroyed by Flick's crazy inventions. So they let him go to the city to find help because they never thought he would actually pull it off. Anyway, to make a long story short, a lot goes wrong, and there wasn't enough food collected for the grasshoppers. But an interesting twist to the story is this from the grasshoppers' point of view. So, before the grasshoppers went back to the ant colony to get the second offering of food, they were drinking in a bar, and one of the lower grasshoppers had asked the boss, why go back to that ant colony at all? They, meaning the grasshoppers, had more than enough food to survive the winter. The leader responded by saying that those ants outnumber the grasshoppers 100 to 1. And if those ants ever figured that out, the grasshoppers would lose their way of life. It wasn't about the food, it was about keeping the ants in line. The lead grasshopper didn't want the ants to figure out they would be more profitable without the grasshoppers, exploiting resources from the ants that really didn't need those things at all. It was greed, fear, and laziness. Some of the other grasshoppers didn't agree with what the leader was doing, but they were also fearful of the boss. Nobody wants to die, and the ways in which death is suffered is horrifying for anyone. That's what keeps them in line. I don't want to spoil the movie, but in the end, the ants did stand up to the grasshoppers and they were able to live for themselves again. Chopper, the grasshopper leader, went away in the end. The colony started to listen to Flick. They started using his inventions to harvest things faster so they had more free time. They didn't do it to keep harvesting more and more. They just wanted enough to survive and be chill with the rest of the season. That's what we all want. I know I keep coming back to the same point over and over. Insanity at its peak, people. My hope is to inspire change by presenting the same information over and over again. The presentation might be different, but the meaning is the same. What can I say? I'm no different than anyone else. I hope that I can at least be creative enough to get through to others. The message we need to hear is that we are the cause of our own problems. This is what happens when we allow others to dictate our lives for us. All these new rules and regulations keep taking away our freedom to live in a way that is suitable for us. Understandably, there should be some basic social rules and guidelines to keep consistency. Beyond that, people generally police themselves pretty well. Granted, they do it in the wrong ways at times, but putting more rules and restrictions is not going to solve anything. When you were a teenager, did more rules in the home help your behavior, or did it make you rebellious? Just saying. I got lost for a moment there. So why did I bring all that up again? Oh, right, Genesis 11:7 says, "Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." End quote. Again, the pronoun of us to me indicates a collective group deciding the fate of their human pets. It's almost like a game of we must not let the humans find out that we ourselves are just humans too. If they did figure that out, we would hold no power over them anymore. I think if our creators did want us to succeed at anything, they might have provided basic knowledge that goes with success. But success in the Bible is appearing to be more and more about how many people and possessions a person has. We will get there soon. Again, my observations, and I'm sorry if I'm ruining religion for you. Feel free to believe in your thing, and I'll continue on my path. I noticed a theme that God, the Lord, and the angel of the Lord had all promised to different people. The promise was always the same. It was always that the descendants from these humans would be more numerous than the stars in the sky. That doesn't sound like any form of wanting to stifle the population. They wanted to make sure their team was the winning team, and more people means more forces. This means people were a commodity rather than an individual with their own thoughts, feelings, and desires. Everything that was done was to make a few powerful and force everyone else to bend to the will of these select few. That's nothing like the modern world today, is it? In closing, I would like to say that the opinions expressed here were strictly of my own making or by my guests. Take what you like and leave the rest. You may come to realize that you may not like me or what I want to share, but let's talk to each other, reason things out, but let there be no gossip or criticism of one another. Instead, let the fellowship of ethical human behavior and the serenity from positive human interaction help you grow and chill out one experience at a time. I would like to thank my higher power for guiding me through this podcast. I hope to spread the message of love, hope, and understanding by touching one life at a time. If you like this podcast, please like and share it. Comments also help other struggling people find it. I am also listener supported, and if you would like to contribute, please feel free to do so. There is no obligation. If you would like to share feedback, you can email me at averagehumanbeing1875@gmail.com. There is also a link you can click if you'd like to send a voice message and add to the content of the show.
I like that exit and intro music. It's pretty chill. So I think at this point, my episodes started to get a little bit better, and hopefully they'll continue to be that way. I can't guarantee because, some things are good, some things are not good. Let's see. Oh, I forgot to look at what's next. Oh, well. We'll find out in the next episode what's next. All right. Have a day.